My name's Roger Hawkins. I'm just interested because, as far as I could see, this was about productivity and potentially investment. And I'm interested that no one so far has mentioned the size of government and local government and the cost of running those two systems that are a drain on your income, that workers have to pay for their rates and their water rates and their power with the greatest of respect, and their infrastructure and all of that. But they're paying it to a system that is actually soaking up resource. It's not building anything, it's not producing anything, it's not selling anything, and those people are not productive as far as adding value to the economy. And I'm interested that no one's raised that as a cost to the country, the cost of local government and the infrastructure and the size of government.
Rick, from an economic analysis point of view, in terms of government spending as a percentage of GDP, what sort of pattern is there in the world? Is there a reasonably direct correlation between the size of that government sector and productivity, i.e. low government spending, high productivity, or not?
I don't know the answer to that question, Rod. One thing I would point out is some Australian analysis I saw many years ago that said that for every dollar of services the government delivered, there was $1.60 of cost attached to it. So that means that, that kind of implies that the bigger your government sector, if you've got those overheads involved in it, it is going to be a drag. But we've also got to recognise we've got a slightly different kind of an economy here. As David was pointing out before, we're a small country. So what might be optimal here is not necessarily the same as what might be optimal in other places. And it's just a question I think is a very complex one.
Robert?
The one city implementation is probably one of the best things to happen to New Zealand. I was involved with the Auckland Regional Physical Activity Sports Strategy, which is, in some ways, I like to think is a precursor to the one city. It was essentially in response to the fact that all the different councils would develop these sports strategies and would involve marketing. They would all do the same thing, so they'd replicate it 10, 11 times. So the money was incredible amounts of money wasted. So finally someone said, well, why don't we just do one thing for the whole of Auckland? And we'll call it a strategy, and it'll be a 5-year strategy. And and that was a simple concept. So the debate about the one Auckland, I can't understand why people are against it. We need to clear cost out, and a lot of it. And there's a lot of money spent on a lot of stuff which we don't need to be spending it on.
I can go along with efficiency and seeking better systems, but I'm also sort of haunted by the sense that there ain't no tax rate low enough, or regulation light enough, or government spending as a percentage of GDP low enough that in itself would actually change the economy. I mean, would that necessarily make Fonterra do anything different towards a higher value activity? So, I mean, I accept the point, but there are very good examples, particularly in Scandinavian countries, where government spending is a high proportion of GDP, but we don't think of those countries as being not innovative or not producers of high value goods and services. So that's the... Yeah. Sorry, microphone there, thanks.
Some of that Scandinavian spend, government spending, is much smarter than some of the New Zealand stuff. For example, the free university courses. I could go to Sweden and do a course and my tuition would be absolutely free. Now that's a very smart strategy if you're looking at developing minds, developing an economy, such as Sven and AJ referred to, I think.
I think one of the other big differences is that we're not starting with their wealth. I mean, my straight answer, or my attempt at a straight answer to the question is I believe there is a correlation between GDP per capita and government spend as a share of the economy. I don't think it's a straight line correlation. I don't think it's a simple relationship. Sweden and Norway, are exceptions at one end. But the US and Germany and Australia, for that matter, all have higher standards of living than we do and lower public sector shares of their economy. I think it's a relationship we can't ignore, but I think Rod makes a good point. So, you know, do we just follow that line down to zero? Well, no, plainly. On the other hand, I think a better response in a way is there clearly is a competition. I mean, not everybody is free to live anywhere in the world that they want, but lots of capital is mobile and lots of individuals are mobile, and plainly tax rates make some difference. So if we stand back and say Scandinavia does it, our tax rate can't be a problem, we're kidding ourselves, and at the margin we will lose some of the investment we're plainly going to need. So I think the tax rates and what the government spends are part of the problem. I don't think it's fair, with respect, on the other hand, to dismiss the whole of the public sector as unproductive. I mean, in a direct sense, you know, that there's a narrow point, but, you know, actually what the health system does helps a lot of people get back to work. What the education system does, at its best, absolutely prepares a lot of people to be productive. You know, even... Sure.
Why have working for families that takes money off you have a bureaucracy to give it back?
Well, because it's not 100%, you know, transfer like that. You can argue about whether working for families is a good idea or not. I actually think that something along those lines has been advocated for in lots of countries and has a lot going for it. But let me say no more about that because it's too narrow a specific. I think there is a better argument for addressing the level of public expenditure and rather than the correlation. That's a good question worth pursuing. But the better argument simply is there's an opportunity cost to every dollar. You know, the dollars that are taken out of tax, of our pockets, even in tax, even though they're recycled and even though they might be spent productively, are not immediately available for other purposes. And you can believe all you like in the power of leveraging things, but the wedge that disappears in the first place is a cost. I mean, we could have 3 times the size of the education sector that we've got at the moment, but not for free we can't. One reason why the education budget, or parts of it, got cut this year is because the dollars are scarce. I mean, I'm not sure that I would call it a crisis. In fact, I'd rather not, even if I was tempted, because I think the word's easily overused. But right now, the government's accounts are in deficit badly, and they're going to get worse for a while. We have a fiscal challenge, if it's not a crisis. We do not have a lot of spare dollars around for the public sector to do a whole lot more. And we're not going to have any time sort of soon. So fancy ideas for how the government could do a whole lot are going to be very challenging, just literally to implement, let alone whether they actually contribute to getting us forward.
Can I just ask him?
I know AJ was very keen to say something, and I'll come to you afterwards. Thank you, David. AJ.
I just wanted to go back to the point that I made earlier as well. With the public sector, the discussion's been going on, but with individuals in private sector as well. And from what I heard was New Zealand, it's one of the easiest places for an entrepreneur to start a business or a young person to take initiative and get some innovation in the economy as well. But what is stopping, I think, is the regulations or the environment in which we're in now. Because from what I can see, I think Kiwis or New Zealanders are really early adopters of technology as well as innovations that's coming in from outside. But I can't understand or I can't make sense why that isn't showing through, or what's stopping it, and why is it working in some other parts and not here.